I'm sharing a story that genuinely creeped me out. This isn't your typical ghost story. This is about a person, just like you or me, who found themselves trapped in a nightmare, all within the walls of a place we all take for granted, the post office. Imagine working alone, late at night, and suddenly, the routine becomes a terrifying game of cat and mouse. Letters disappear, machines malfunction, and a chilling figure watches from the darkness. This is Mailroom Horror, and trust me, you'll be checking your mail a little differently after this. I've worked at the post office for what feels like an eternity. The routine has become mundane, and the faces of the customers have blended together into a sea of familiarity. But there's one time of day that sets my nerves on edge: night shifts. The post office is always quiet at night, the only sound being the occasional creak of the old building and the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. As I sorted through the mail, my mind began to wander. The shadows cast by the light seemed to grow longer and darker, like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch the letters from my hands. I shivered, despite the warmth of the summer evening. It was just my imagination, I told myself. But the feeling persisted. The post office was a small, single-story building with a large glass window at the front. The window was reinforced with metal bars, a testament to the occasional break-ins that had plagued the neighborhood. I felt a sense of security behind the bars, but tonight they seemed more like a prison than a protection. As the hours ticked by, the silence began to get to me. I started to hear things. The creaks and groans of the old building sounded like footsteps, and the rustle of the wind outside seemed like whispers in my ear. I tried to focus on my work, but my eyes kept drifting to the window. The darkness outside seemed to press against the glass, like a physical presence trying to get in. I took a deep breath and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. I had worked night shifts before, and nothing had ever happened. But tonight felt different. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I worked, I started to notice strange things. Letters would go missing, only to reappear an hour later. The sorting machine would jam, and when I went to fix it, I would find that the problem had resolved itself. It was as if the post office itself was playing tricks on me. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the occurrences continued. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. The shadows on the wall seemed to move and twist, like living things. I heard footsteps in the back room, even though I knew I was alone. And then, I saw it. A figure, tall and imposing, standing just beyond the edge of the light. Its presence seemed to fill the room, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I tried to scream, but my voice was distorted. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. I was left shaken, my heart racing and my breath coming in short gasps. I tried to tell, frozen in my throat. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It just stood there, watching me. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The figure seemed to be waiting for something, but I didn't know what. Time seemed to stretch out, becoming endless, and myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew what I had seen. The post office seemed to be haunted, and I was the only one who knew. As the night wore on, the occurrences continued. The lights flickered, and the shadows seemed to grow longer and darker. I felt like I was being herded towards some unknown fate, and I couldn't escape. The post office, once a place of routine and familiarity, had become a nightmare. And then, just as the first light of dawn was creeping over the horizon, everything stopped. The shadows retreated, the light steadied, and the silence was broken by the sound of birds chirping outside. I was left feeling shaken and exhausted, wondering if I had really seen what I thought I had. As I locked up the post office and headed home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The figure, if it had been real, seemed to have vanished into the dawn light. But I knew that I would never forget the terror I had experienced that night. The next night, I almost called in sick. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked pale and haggard, dark circles underlining my eyes despite a fitful sleep filled with unsettling shadows and the feeling of being watched. But bills don't pay themselves, and night shifts were the only ones available when I started this job. So, with a heavy sigh and a thermos of strong coffee, I found myself back in the familiar, yet now menacing, fluorescent glow of the post office. The evening started predictably, almost boringly so. The initial relief was palpable. Maybe it was just a bad dream, a product of exhaustion and too much late-night coffee. I sorted through the evening's drop-offs, the rhythmic whir of the sorting machine a comforting sound after the terrifying silence of the previous night. I even allowed myself a small chuckle at my overactive imagination. Just shadows, I muttered to myself, stacking envelopes into neat piles. Just the old building settling. But the feeling of unease crept back in slowly, like a chill wind seeping through a crack in the windowpane. The silence, which had initially felt normal, began to press in again, heavier this time, laden with expectation. The fluorescent lights, usually a harsh, unwavering white, flickered suddenly, just for a fraction of a second, plunging the sorting room into near darkness before snapping back on. My heart jumped into my throat, and I spun around, searching for a cause, but everything seemed normal. Just a power fluctuation, I told myself firmly, trying to ignore the increasingly frantic beat of my pulse against my ribs. I tried to distract myself, turning on the radio to a low volume, hoping the human voices would break the oppressive silence. A generic pop song filled the air, but even the cheerful melody felt thin and brittle against the growing dread. I found myself constantly glancing towards the large front window, the barred glass reflecting my own anxious face back at me, distorted and pale in the dim light. The darkness outside was a thick, impenetrable wall, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the edge of the streetlight's weak halo. Then, the letters started again. I was sorting a batch of local deliveries, placing them into their designated bins, when I noticed a postcard vanish right before my eyes. I had just held it in my hand, noting the brightly colored image of a sunset over the lake, and then, gone. I blinked, assuming I must have simply misplaced it, maybe slipped it under another pile. I meticulously searched the sorting table, the floor, even my pockets, but the postcard was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, I moved on, attributing it to tiredness, a momentary lapse in concentration. But then it happened again. And again. Envelopes would disappear from my hand, only to reappear moments later in the wrong bin, or even on the floor behind me. It was like a child's prank, but there was no child here, only me, trapped in the echoing silence of the post office after midnight. The playful nature of the disturbances was unsettling, less overtly threatening than the silent figure from the night before, but somehow more insidious. It felt like something was toying with me, testing my sanity, pushing me to the edge. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, a result of the lingering fear from the previous night. But the rational part of my brain was losing the battle against the creeping sense of dread. The post office, once a sanctuary of routine, had become a stage for a twisted game, and I was the unwilling player. The sorting machine, which had been humming along smoothly, suddenly jammed again. I approached it, ready to clear the obstruction, but as I reached out, the machine whirred to life, the issue resolving itself without my intervention. It was as if the machine itself was mocking me, a mechanical accomplice in the eerie charade. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and the shadows seemed to dance and shift, playing tricks on my eyes. The radio, which had been a source of comfort, now felt like a lifeline about to be cut. The pop song ended, and the next track was a slow, melancholic ballad that seemed to echo the loneliness and fear I was feeling. I reached for the dial, ready to change the station, when I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. "Help me." The voice was faint, barely audible over the music, but it sent a chill down my spine. I froze, my hand hovering over the radio. I listened intently, but the whisper didn't come again. The ballad continued, its mournful melody filling the room. I told myself it was just the wind, a trick of the sound, but the unease in my chest only grew. I decided to take a break, needing to clear my head. I stepped into the small break room, closing the door behind me. The room was dimly lit, the light bulb flickering slightly. I leaned against the counter, taking deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. But even here, the sense of being watched didn't leave me. I glanced around the room, my eyes settling on a small, dusty window above the sink. The glass was cracked, and the view outside was obscured by a layer of grime. I reached up to wipe it clean, my fingers leaving smudges on the glass. As I peered outside, I saw it, a figure, standing just beyond the edge of the streetlight's glow. It was the same tall, imposing figure from the night before, its presence filling the space, watching me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, its gaze fixed on me. I fumbled for the light switch, turning it on and off, trying to dispel the shadow. But the figure remained, a silent sentinel in the darkness. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond, but I felt a shift in the air, a change in the atmosphere. The tension in the room seemed to ease slightly, and the figure began to fade, its outline blurring until it was nothing more than a shadow, a trick of the light. I watched, mesmerized, as it disappeared, leaving me alone in the dimly lit break room. I leaned against the counter, my breath coming in ragged gasps. What was happening to me? Was I losing my mind, or was there something truly sinister at play in this post office? The questions swirled in my head, but I had no answers. Determined to finish my shift, I returned to the sorting room, my steps heavy with a mix of fear and resolve. The sorting machine continued to hum, the envelopes and letters a familiar, comforting routine. But the sense of being watched never left me, a constant, nagging presence at the edge of my consciousness. As the night wore on, the occurrences became more frequent. Letters would vanish and reappear, the sorting machine would jam and fix itself, and the shadows would dance and twist. But the figure didn't return, and the whispers didn't come again. I told myself that maybe it was over, that the worst was behind me. But as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, casting a pale glow through the barred window, I knew that this was far from over. The post office, with its creaking floors and flickering lights, had become a place of mystery and terror, and I was the only one who knew the truth. I locked up the post office, my hands shaking as I secured the door. The walk home was a blur, my mind racing with the events of the night. I knew that I couldn't keep this up, that I couldn't continue working night shifts in a place that seemed to be haunted by something I couldn't explain. But the bills still needed to be paid, and the job was still mine. As I stepped into my apartment, the familiar surroundings provided a small measure of comfort. I collapsed onto the couch, the events of the night replaying in my mind. I knew that I had to make a decision, continue working and risk my sanity, or find a new job and leave the post office behind. But as I drifted off to sleep, the image of the tall, imposing figure lingered in my mind, a silent reminder that the post office had secrets, and it wasn't done with me yet. The following weeks became a tense, drawn-out battle against my own sanity. I tried to rationalize everything, attributing the strange occurrences to stress, exhaustion, or even a gas leak. I researched local lore, hoping to find some explanation for the figure and the whispers, but found nothing. The post office, it seemed, held its secrets close. The nights continued, each one a slow descent into dread. I'd arrive, my stomach churning, and force myself to focus on the mundane tasks, hoping to keep the fear at bay. The letters still vanished and reappeared, the sorting machine still played its tricks, and the shadows still danced in the corners of my vision. But the figure remained elusive, a phantom presence that haunted the edges of my perception. One particularly stormy night, The wind howled outside, rattling the barred windows and sending shivers down my spine. The power flickered constantly, plunging the sorting room into brief moments of darkness, each one a heart-stopping jolt. I was sorting a large batch of mail, my hands moving mechanically, when I noticed a letter addressed to a name I didn't recognize, Elias Thorne. The address was an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town, a place rumored to be haunted. Intrigued, and perhaps driven by a morbid curiosity, I opened the letter. It was a single sheet of paper, covered in faded, spidery handwriting. The words were disjointed, rambling, but a few phrases stood out: trapped, forgotten, help me. A chill ran down my spine. This was the same plea I had heard whispered in the silence. I decided to investigate. I took the letter, locked up the post office, and drove to the address. The house was a dilapidated Victorian mansion, its windows boarded up and its paint peeling. The storm raged around me, the wind whipping through the trees, creating an eerie symphony of groans and creaks. I approached the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The front door was locked, but a side window was slightly ajar. I squeezed through the opening, landing in a dusty, cobweb-filled hallway. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. I wandered through the house, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The rooms were empty, the furniture covered in dust sheets, but I could feel a presence, a lingering energy that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I found a staircase leading to the upper floors, and I cautiously made my way up. On the second floor, I found a room with a single window overlooking the storm-tossed landscape. The room was sparsely furnished, with a wooden desk and a single chair. On the desk, I found a stack of old letters, all addressed to Elias Thorne. I began to read the letters, my flashlight beam illuminating the faded ink. They were written by a man named Elias, detailing his loneliness and isolation. He spoke of a feeling of being trapped, of being forgotten, of needing help. As I read, I realized that Elias Thorne was the figure I had seen in the post office. He was trapped, not in the house, but in the post office, a place where his letters, his pleas for help, were handled every day. I understood then. The post office wasn't haunted, it was a conduit, a place where the echoes of forgotten souls lingered. Elias Thorne was trapped, not by a malevolent spirit, but by the weight of his own forgotten existence. I decided to help him. I took the letters, returned to the post office, and placed them in a special box, a designated lost mail container. I spoke to the empty room, promising to remember him, to tell his story. The next night, the post office was quiet. The letters didn't vanish, the sorting machine didn't jam, and the shadows didn't dance. The figure didn't appear. The post office felt normal. I continued to work, but the fear was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. I knew that Elias Thorne was at rest, his story finally told. The post office was no longer a place of terror, but a place of remembrance. And I, the night shift worker, was its keeper. And so, that brings us to the end of our journey into the mailroom horror. What started as a terrifying ordeal transformed into something almost peaceful. It's a reminder, I think, that not every haunting is about malevolent spirits. Sometimes, it's about the weight of forgotten stories, the echoes of lives that have faded away. This story really made me think about the places we consider ordinary. Places like post offices, libraries, even our own homes, they all hold layers of history, stories that might be hidden just beneath the surface. And sometimes, those stories are waiting to be heard. It also made me think about the power of empathy. The night shift worker, instead of running away from the fear, chose to understand it, to help a soul find peace. It shows us that even in the darkest of situations, compassion can shine through. I hope this story gave you a good scare, but also maybe a little bit of food for thought. Next time you're in a quiet, seemingly ordinary place, take a moment to consider the stories that might be hidden within its walls. You never know what you might find. Hey, horror fans. If you enjoyed our chilling tale and want to keep the spine-tingling stories coming, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support keeps the darkness alive. Share this video with your friends. Let's spread the fear together. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a hair-raising moment. Join our community of thrill seekers and prepare for more eerie adventures. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay scared.